So as people are arriving to this webinar, I want to say welcome and thank you for joining us. We'll be starting in a few minutes, but we've just opened the room to let people in at this stage. So welcome to our webinar on working with stress as coaches. We've got a panel of 3 experts in the field of health, well-being, recovery, neuroscience, resilience, and much more. And then in the background, I'll be listening, and my colleague Georgia will be helping us with any technical issues and collecting any questions that you have. The webinar is for 45 minutes. It will be recorded and it will go onto the AoEC website. And any questions that you have, we'll have a question and answer session. So put questions into the chat box and we'll collect them and answer those questions as soon as we can. Our panelists are Sheila Campbell-Lloyd, Anthony Eldridge-Rogers, and Jenny Campbell. And so they'll take it in turns to talk to you, and then we'll come back with all 3 of them to answer any questions. But the question we want to start with, and I'll put this one to you first, Sheila, is how do you help a client deal with stress?
Thanks, Moira, and welcome everybody. It's a delight to be here today. I've always been fascinated in the neuroscience of stress, and I've always wondered, how can we have the same brains, the same component parts, and yet the way we're wired is as unique to each of us as our fingerprints. We all need a bit of stress in our lives. It keeps us on our toes, it keeps us sharp. But when that stress starts to compromise our ability to do our job effectively, then we need to intervene, and that's when coaching can help. I want to share with you an example of how I use neuroscience with one of my clients. My client's name's Rhiannon. She's a real live person, and she's very bright, very knowledgeable, very articulate in what she does, and she's on the fast track. She's young, and she came to me because she was really stressed, really anxious, because every time she went into a board meeting, she just explained to me she just stopped thinking. She couldn't think, and her brain would freeze. And then another occasion, she would find that she became overly aggressive, or pretty aggressive, when she was being asked legitimate questions in regards to her team's performance. Not only did she have all of this brain stuff going on, but she also physically could feel her mouth would dry up, her heart would beat faster, and she also got this really bad rash in her neck. And she noticed that before she went into the board meetings, but she also noticed it when panelists, people in the board meeting would say to her, Rhiannon, what's going on with your neck? It's all flushed. So that would make her even more stressed. So whilst I could have used lots of different coaching techniques and interventions with her, I really felt that giving her a basic understanding of how the brain works and the neuroscience of stress would really help her out. And so the main, whilst there's lots of component parts of stress, there's the lots of mechanisms in your brain. The main one that triggers the stress response is called your amygdala, and that's the amygdala. I'm not going to use fancy slides today because it would take up too much time. So your amygdala. Now, your amygdala, its primary role is to keep us safe. It's constantly scanning the environment, both externally and internally, physically inside and externally, for any signs of threat. And it's as soon when it perceives a threat, it then triggers a flight, flight, freeze response, which we'll talk about in a wee bit more detail in a minute. When our amygdalas are running, we don't really have an idea unless you understand how the amygdalas work. Unless you can, unless you've been trained in this, you have no idea that they're running. They're just running in the background. But they're a bit like a hard drive, like a computer's hard drive. They store memories and images, and they constantly say, is that a threat? Is it not a threat? And then if they find it a threat, they'll store it. And when they perceive a threat response, they'll trigger, as I said, the fight, flight, freeze response. And in that moment, when your amygdala is triggered, it shuts down your ability to think logically and rationally. It shuts down an area of your brain called the prefrontal cortex. And that part of our brain is what they call the executive function. And so therefore we really struggle to think. And why does that happen? Because the brain takes up roughly 25% of our energy. And when we have a stress response, the amygdala says, you cannot afford to be using all that energy, because I need to send it to your body for a fight, flight, freeze response. So therefore your lungs start to beat faster, your lungs start to breathe faster, your heart starts to beat faster. God, I got that the wrong way. I'm having an amygdala response here. My lungs start to breathe heavier, my heart starts to beat faster, you start to prime yourself up for action. And so in that moment, our ability to think logically and rationally is compromised. And indeed, some research tells us that we can lose roughly 15 IQ points in that moment. So when Rhiannon was in the board, in any board meetings, what she was finding was that our amygdala was starting to perceive those boards as a threat. And in those moments, it was shutting down her ability to think logically and rationally. And it then got her body ready for a stress response, that fight, flight, freeze response. So little wonder she froze in those moments, or she started coming out fighting. So once Rhiannon started to work out, oh, right, that's what's going on. Okay, right, I can start to manage that. She could understand the mechanisms. We then went in to look at what's the triggers? What is the trigger in the hard drive, in her amygdala's hard drive that was triggering that stress response? And we started to unpack it. And what she noticed was that actually there was a guy one of the directors on the board reminded of her an old school teacher. And every time she's seen him, she felt really anxious. And when we unpacked it, she realized that actually that's what that stress response was all about, was her amygdala was making an association. Now, like any hard drive, it can be really corrupted. And so therefore she was making these links with the director and her old school teacher. And so when you start to get to understand the component parts of how the brain works and the mechanisms associated with stress, you can really start to mitigate how you show up and how you manage stress in the workplace. What was wonderful about Rhiannon's feedback, and I'll just read it to you here, she said, understanding how my brain works and learning to manage my triggers has literally changed my life. And so what I would encourage anybody in this call today is to really start to think about how you could integrate neuroscience and coaching, neuroscience of stress into your coaching practice. We often hear the words tools in our coaching toolbox. And so I'd encourage you to do that, because it really helps a person understand, that is why I'm doing what I'm doing. It's those mechanical and component parts of our brain. Now, to talk about that today would be huge. It's a massive, massive subject. But what I would encourage anybody to do is to buy this book. It's brilliant. It's called Rewire Your Anxious Brain. And in this book, you will find all the information in relation to the amygdala, the sympathetic nervous system, and vagus nerve, etc. Brilliant. I would also encourage you to look at my website, but unfortunately it's down. So please feel free to link in with me on LinkedIn, and I'm more than happy to have a chat. Thank you.
So I think Sheila is passing the baton to me and Georgia is just getting up. So thank you so much, Sheila. I think everybody has kind of been awakened already in thinking, actually. And I hear a couple of things that are really resonant, and I'm sure that Anthony will be similar in this, is checking for agency in a client. How much can they take on for themselves and understand it? And you as an enabler of that, as a coach, I think that's really amazingly important. And also the noticing, which is very much part and parcel of resilience. So I'm a resilience researcher. We run the accreditation program. There are lots of practitioners. I noticed that some of them are on, so hello to you guys. Resilience is your ability to reshape yourself, the ability to adapt. It is also a sign of psychological safety in self, which is very interesting. And I'm going to speak to this chart here that everybody is seeing, called the resilience dynamic. That's one of our research models, and any of the practitioners are actually using this as one of the guiding maps of resilience. And it shows exactly that. It shows different levels of resilience, of that adaptability, of that ability to have capacity, surplus capacity for change or not. And stress is very much part of this picture. So this map shows from breakdown through to fragmentation, through to what we call break even, right through to breakthrough. In the lower ends of resilience, breakdown, it coincides with a clinical breakdown where somebody has a catastrophic inability to get hold of their own resources. You go to the other end and break through, and somebody remains resourceful no matter what's going on. Okay, so they are hugely adaptable in that. They remain resourceful, they are adaptable, they are energized, they're likely to be pretty persistent in what's meaningful for them. They're likely to say no a lot, actually, to what is not meaningful. And you've got all the sort of areas in between. Coping and bounce back in that break-even space is often where most of the working population is. Coping is where you are just meeting the demand of day-to-day. Right, so my hands are showing that, you know, this sort of thing of if the demand is up and you're just about keeping it together, you're coping, you've got no surplus at the end. Bounce back is quite different. Bounce back is where you do have surplus. It's where you punch through challenges. It's where you feel that adrenaline drive. You can go up and down as a result. So when you're raising that adrenaline, that ability to galvanize your resources through to the highest level, you may drop off again at the end. Obviously, if there are too many of them, they can cram together and you can slip back to coping. Now, where stress shows up here and it becomes dominant, stressors are everywhere. And Sheila was very clear in her language about using the stress reaction as opposed to just stress. It's a bit of a woolly word. And I think this is a really helpful thing for any clients, is just to notice actually what your stress reactions are, that fight, flight, flight or freeze that Sheila talked about. The stress reaction that hijacks, you know, the amygdala hijack, is really from coping through to fragmentation and breakdown. Breakdown is where there has been a flood of the stress, the physical reaction of stress. Fragmentation is where it's highly variable. Coping to fragmentation is where it's variable too. At the higher ends of resilience, you have less hijack by stress. Okay, so resilience is a buffer to stress here. Now, I worked with a client, also very smart person, a university, and who was in bounce back. Now, bounce back is an incredibly attractive place for high performers. It's quite sexy. You are actually driven. You're getting there. You're punching through. Okay. And actually, it's quite interesting to help a client own that space and own all of the highs and all of the lows. So that agency is available in that space, you know, helping clients notice their triggers, helping them own it, and helping them towards stabilizing. That's really the core aspects of coaching. We use all sorts of tools like energy mapping, etc. But fundamental in here is about being able to be present. This client has had many, many things happen to them. They are a female leader in an academically male institute. It's tricky for them, and they have the old sort of syndromes of am I good enough? They also have too much workload. On top of that, recently, they have really had an extraordinarily difficult personal event that has happened, and they are finding it very difficult to cope. So this person has moved to coping and in fact to fragmentation, okay, and is deeply in fragmentation, is potentially suicidal, okay. All of the ethics of coaching are mammoth in here, okay. This person is no longer resourceful. They have an awareness of what's going on, so they are resourceful enough. And the key aspects is whether this person has agency and can take responsibility. And to some extent they can. However, my ethics are up. I have a very strong relationship with them. I'm aware of the lack of security, of safety in this person. And so I call on other experts with her permission. And in fact, she's got the agency to enact on that. There's a really different thing here from bounce back where you're actually enjoying the work of stabilization towards actually helping somebody be safe. All of that is available, you know, under resilience. And it's really about practice, about understanding, hugely ethical part of our profession. And so, you know, I'm naming this because it's something in our field right now because of the pandemic. Where you go with this, how you help people, absolutely, it's about understanding, accepting. So the core enablers that we see of resilience at these kind of levels are being able to be present and helping people energize themselves. So some of the tools associated with that, but the principles behind resilience coaching are there. So I hope that's given you a flavour of movement, of where resilience is and how stress is, and the absolute kind of nature of you being in a resourceful place yourself as coaches in order to be able to coach well, safely, and on behalf of, you know, any kind of client, decreasing that hijack of stress and increasing their resilience. So I'm now going to hand over to Anthony.
Hello there. I assume that you can all see me. So welcome everybody. Thank you very much. Wonderful to have this opportunity to share with you thoughts about stress and how to work with it as a coach. And just want to say thank you, Sheila and Jenny, so much for laying a lot of groundwork. Really interesting. And of course, I'm going to try to avoid sort of repeating some of the points you've made to add in some of the perspectives that we have. So you're going to see on the screen a slide. And just before I jump into this slide, I just want to say that the most important first step that we want to consider as a coach when we're working with anyone around stress, or indeed around everything, is around awareness. Where are they in their knowledge of themselves around what's happening to them? It's amazing also how people don't necessarily, particularly when they're stressed, they lose the ability to find a perspective on what's happening to them. They sort of get caught up inside it, and then it becomes very much about the experience, emotional experience that they're having. So they're sort of in a crisis at some level. And so they lose the ability to reflect on what's going on. So the most important thing to do from a coaching perspective is to, and again, this is very contextual, of course, because when people present with stress, it can be with a new client, it can be somebody that we've not worked with before, it can be somebody who has, you know, high levels of awareness and so on. But we really want to, you know, be working with them to find out what they know. And of course, Sheila and Jenny, that's what you were both pointing to, was really this idea of let's get knowledgeable, and knowledge, of course, is power. The second step is really to think about, is a framework going to help? And what I've found incredibly useful is this diagram in front of you, which I use actually with clients in different forms, which essentially tries to allow the coaching to self-navigate with your client to a place of understanding where they are, you know, in terms of their stress in relation to treatment, recovery, and wellness. You've got to remember that a lot of people are in very acute stress, chronic stress. Some people in low-level stress. Some people are well equipped to come out of it. Some people aren't. So we want to be thinking about trying to understand with our clients, or a client to understand where are they in it? Are they? And what I do is I give them the diagram actually, and I say, you know, which is pretty easy to understand for most people. So where do you think you are in this? And that, of course, provokes a conversation about what does it mean to be in recovery? What does it mean to be well? And obviously people who are in treatment or in some way, which really includes medical interventions of, you know, at various different levels and intensities, will recognize that. So what this does is this introduces a sort of a cognitive element into what's happening to them. So it's encouraging people to step outside of themselves and to try to witness the process that they're going through in their stress. And then, of course, depending on how they identify, gives you some signals and information as to perhaps how serious their internal world is. So if a client says, actually, you know, I really feel like I'm in you know, the sort of treatment place, you know, I really need help, it's a clue as to how you can proceed with the coaching. Quite a lot of people also say, actually, you know, fundamentally, I'm well, I'm just having a stressful period. And so that's a different context, and you can approach it differently from the coaching. Of course, stress, as you see on the right, there's an arrow, stress is related to performance. So performance, you know, goes up with well-being, broadly speaking, and goes down as stress becomes more acute. And this, of course, is not an absolute rule, but you know, it is a broad generalization. I just want to mention healthy stress. I mean, you know, a lot of people think I want to not be stressed. I mean, this is not what you want at all. What you want to do is have a really good, solid relationship with stress, so that you can understand how to use it positively and proactively. So, and I love again what Jenny was saying about bounce back there. So, stress isn't a bad guy. It's just it's really essentially our relationship to it. The third point I want to bring to is in my practice here is next slide, please, Georgia. If I could have the next slide, that would be great. Yeah. So the brain is in the body, as you know, and the body depends utterly on the brain depends utterly on the body for its well-being, and of course it's the control center for the body. So it's in this recursive relationship with the body, and of course we know that the body is sustained by and the mind is sustained by all the inputs in life. So I have a holistic approach. So the next thing we want to be doing in the coaching is around what I call a holistic assessment, because if you, again, so you have these things which are in recursive relationship with each other. So if you're stressed, you sometimes don't sleep. If you don't sleep, well, guess what? You become more stressed. So you've got these kind of feedback mechanisms taking place, and that happens across quite a lot of domains, sleep being a very obvious one. But this diagram really, you know, sets out the fact that we want to be open in coaching to understand that stress is not just something that is about the brain as such. It's about the whole being of the person you're working with. And so you want to be interested in what's going on right across the board. And more importantly, you want your clients to understand the relationship between all of these inputs. So these are really important, and it's a way also of managing biochemical responses, but that's quite a big subject. So we'll move on to the next slide, please. So the fourth piece of this is simply to say, excuse me for a second. That's my time. Very quickly, soothing and planning. One of the most important first steps in any with stress is to think about how can we shift away from the tension that stress is creating in the body and the mind, loss of functioning, and we want to be thinking about how to stimulate a move back into prefrontal cortex, which was mentioned earlier on. So my strategy in coaching is always that soothing is the most important thing, because we want to get all those levels and all those chemicals and everything quietened down. And planning is about creating structures within which we can look at how the client might have a pathway out of the current stress experience into a place where they feel that they're more manageable. And again, planning is more a function of prefrontal cortex, so that again encourages them to think about using that part of their brain rather than to be in the stress. And again, it's this idea of witnessing what's happening to them. So those are the kind of four main areas that I'd be looking at in coaching people. And thank you very much. Hope you got something out of that.
Thank you very much. A few questions have been coming in as you've been speaking, and a couple of you have already been answering the questions, so I'll pick up one or two of them. Sheila, what would you suggest for people who are wanting to develop skills in neuroscience?
Well, come on the course. That's a good way to do it. Read as well. Really, to be honest with you, it's a vast subject, and there's lots of elements to it. But if you're looking to help your clients, then just to get the basic component parts of neuroscience and how it affects stress in the clients, because it's a common denominator in everything that we're talking about these days, stress. But really, the best thing to do is to come along onto one of the courses, or give me a phone and we can have a chat through their specific situation. And yeah, it's just working out those key component parts and then how you can help your clients using them.
Thank you. And Anthony, would you say a bit more about some of the practical things that people can do to manage their stress?
Yes. I would say very much paying attention to all those inputs that you saw on the diagram. You want to be interested in how you're sleeping, what you're eating, what rest you're taking. I mean, your body is a very tangible biological organism, and it responds to the behaviors and environments it's in. So I can't overestimate how important it is to put attention on that. I particularly would focus in on sleep. If sleep is a problem, then you would want to be thinking about taking steps to remedy that. Sleep and diet, exercise, of course, meditation. All of it matters. All of it is going to make a difference. So that's where I'd be going.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if this is for you or for all of you, but what do you do if you have a client who doesn't seem to recognize where they are on that continuum? Anthony, perhaps it is for you, really. It's about your continuum. And I'm presuming by that question that it's somebody who's highly stressed, who's either in denial or just unaware.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. And of course, the concern is that, there's obviously sort of co-occurring conditions, and you want to be aware that there may well be depression, underlying issues. So it's quite contextual in the context in which that presents. If it's somebody you don't know, you don't have any sort of sense of the history of them, you would want to be thinking about getting more information and proceeding very carefully. And of course, referring is always, multidisciplinary support for people with chronic stress and crisis stress is very important as well. So you want to be using your referral sources, which hopefully you have across other disciplines, and reaching out to them. You need to be taking some supervision support on it as well, because it's quite stressful as a coach, actually, to have a highly stressed client, who's in crisis. So you need to be using all the toolkit that best practice of coaching provides.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Moira, may I add something to that? It's amazing for me, and I think for anyone who's a resilience engine practitioner, how much, for example, in bounce back or in coping, people are prepared to hide from the truth of what they're experiencing. And, you know, anyone can see themselves in a particular light. It's kind of often delusional if you are actually experiencing quite a lot of stress, or this, you know, you're hijacked by that stress reaction. And just helping somebody say it, you know, having somebody, you know, whatever means it is, you as a coach saying it, you as offering your experience of them, you asking them questions about it, if they have sufficient safety, is often like a pin coming out of, you know, this held system. And it's a huge relief to see the truth of where they're at. And I think that is a first step then for them owning it and changing what is the underlying conditions. And again, I would say as long as it's safe to do that. So I think it's really helpful just to kind of be we are holders of truth up for the client, you know, help them own their own truth.
Yep. Can I add one point about that, which is that also this speaks really to the importance of the relationship in coaching. I mean, you know, the degree to which you can hold this is the degree to which you've worked on and developed a powerful relationship with your client. And that's your primary role, actually, is to be that ally and that safe harbor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And have any of you used heart rate variability measurement devices to give the clients data-based insight? Jenny, Sheila, you're nodding. Sheila, you're on mute.
No, I know they've unmuted me. Yeah, I've used it's Heart Math. If you go, there's a company called Heart Math, and that's really interesting. You can put, I've got some good video clips on that, but you can stick it on your ear and you can actually then see the heart rate of the client, so you can see how they're really stressed. But you've got to be really, you've got to know what you're doing when you're doing that as well, Phil, because otherwise it goes back to the ethical responsibility as a coach. And you just need to be really careful. But yeah, it's been really successful, and I've used it in training courses as well. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Clinicians often sort of work alongside people who are working in resilience, and I think it's helpful data if the client can assimilate and understand that data. But if it makes them feel even worse, you know, then that, you know, the primary role of helping people within this is to enable them to feel better, to actually be more resourceful. And, you know, we could get a bit kind of happy with lots of tools. So I would say it comes with caveat, all these sort of things. So
it can make stress worse in the short term.
Yeah.
So I'm going to move us on and ask Sheila to start with answering this question, which is, how do each of you manage your own stress?
Yeah, well, I used to be really poor at managing my own stress, actually, which is ironic considering it's an area that I'm interested in. That's maybe why I was interested in it. But one of these are just the fundamentals of how I manage my stress. But the first one is supervision. As a coach, I every month I go to supervision. I have a peer group and a one-to-one, and it's invaluable. It's absolutely invaluable for helping me unpack my stress and any stress that I have with the client. And I remember one particular client, I wanted to reach across the table and shake her. Clearly I didn't. I couldn't understand what was going on. And it was in supervision that they helped me unpack and realize actually it was stuff from my past that was being triggered by my client. So my amygdala was being triggered in that moment, which then leads me on to, this is the other formal support mechanism, is therapy. I actually go to therapy every couple of months, and it's not because I want to lie on a couch, and it's because I really, really want to understand myself. I want to understand what my triggers are, because I firmly believe that who you are is who you coach or who you supervise. So you really have to understand yourself in that moment to help your clients. And if your stuff is getting in the way of yourself, you're going to get in the way. From a more non-formal approach, one thing that I do every single day is get out in nature. I am absolutely committed to getting out, walking, cycling. We have a farm, and it's just getting out in nature and exercising, because that really helps to mitigate any cortisol level or adrenaline increase you have in yourself, and just just being at one with nature, but making sure that in that moment you don't start to worry. I used to go and ride my horse and I'd be worrying about the next meeting. Try and not do that. Try and just be in the moment and enjoy the fact that you're out in nature. Second last one is connect. Go and connect with people. Problem shared is a problem halved. And genuinely, if you can start to think and share stuff with your friends, it really helps. And finally, but I think this is probably the most important one, is self-care. Be kinder to yourself. I was terrible at that, and I really learned to actually go stop and be kind to yourself. I can already hear the whirring in my head. Oh, did I say enough? Was I good enough? Already going on, and I'm already starting to say, no, stop. Be nicer and kinder to yourself. Show yourself some compassion. It is what it is. Thank you. That's me.
Jenny.
Oh, you're there.
Yeah, lovely. So I've got two parts to answering this question. The first is kind of what I have learned across the years as a resilience researcher and trainer and supervisor, etc. And it comes absolutely from the research. And I was doing some of it, but actually the research made me sort of grow up, stop faffing about with some of this stuff and actually put it into your habits day to day. So there are things absolutely about self-care. So sleep, big part that I really have invested in a lot. Physical exercise, I play tennis. I'm a bit of a nutter for tennis. I also cycle, and I really, really love the outdoors as well. So, you know, lots about the physical. Mentally, I look for fun. I'm a bit of a daft laddie or lassie. I look for inspiration. I do that weekly. I do it deliberately and proactively. I look for inspiration, and it always lifts me. I also look for perspective. I do that really regularly, whether that's through other people or whether it's going to an art gallery or whether it's just going outside. So, you know, that's really important for me. I absolutely connect with purpose as often as I can. So I find that coaching is such a place of groundedness for me that I really feel really good in that, and I feel my best in it. So, you know, coaching is really great. And if I'm not doing very much of it, I'll actually do some pro bono work. And the last thing is I will definitely go out and seek a bit of love. I'll get hugs, I'll hang out with friends, you know, and just kind of feel secure, right? Now, all of that I have learned, and it's pushed me up from bounce back into sort of higher echelons of resilience, and it's been fantastic. And I would say that I can delude myself still. So I have very strong bounce back habits from many, many years in corporate, and I can get really busy, which is one of the barriers to resilience. And I don't like being told to slow down when I'm being busy, because sometimes I quite like it. I did fall over. I fell unwell in the summer, and actually I've taken on a sort of mindfulness. I've just done a train the trainer course in this, and just owning it, just really, really seeing the truth of it has been, I guess, a more recent thing of, even in bounce back or whatever, actually you really need to pay attention to this and see the truth of it. Slowing down, being present. That's my big ticket items for leaving you with that. So over to Anthony.
Thank you very much, Jenny. If you want to put the slides up, Georgia, that'd be great. There we go. So, well, you know, all of the above that Jenny and Sheila have said. So, but yes, so what is key in here? First, you know, again, I come back to this awareness thing. So often I find I catch myself being stressed, and I don't really realize how I got there. It just crept up incrementally. So I'm very, very focused on self-assessment. You know, where actually am I? Getting into my body, taking time to connect with myself, to really, really try to feel where I am. Then if I feel stressed, my strategy is always to soothe it, going out in nature, doing an activity that I know from experience calms me down, connecting with my family. All those inputs around me that you see in the diagram. So, you know, there's on the left, you know, all those things that are out there in life which are stressors in either a good way or not good way. You know, I'm on that. So I eat well, I have a vegan diet, I exercise, I meditate, and so on. So all those things are taking place. One really crucial thing is that if I'm feeling like I'm too stressed to function, get myself back to a normal range of functioning, then I kind of self-describe myself as in recovery. So I put myself back into recovery. And so I will take specific steps and reach out to my support network to bring me back into a place where I feel like I can say, okay, you're in your wellness zone now, Anthony. My support circle involves having different kinds of people and resources available to me. I'm in a men's group. Obviously, I have coach, supervision, and so on. All these kinds of things. And I reach out according to what I feel is needed. The other thing is remembering to stay focused on meaning and purpose for myself. So this is like the guiding golden thread, if you like, through life. Often when I'm stressed, I'm sort of like spinning around going, what does my life mean? What am I actually doing? Am I being, you know what I mean? And there's often that sort of sense of loss of focus. So get focused. And that's about it. It's pretty much important to find, you know, through a process of self-knowledge and coaching, to find out what really works for you. But broadly speaking, that's how I do it. If I could just have the next slide, please, Georgia, that would be great, because I just want to leave you with one really important insight for myself. Innovation management. I love this phrase, I will not let anyone walk through my mind with their dirty feet, which Gandhi said. Basically, the information diet that you have in your life is essentially allowing your mind to contain information that you may not want to have. And this really is crucial for stress. And the next slide, please, Georgia, is my go-to habit is a bath with music. I used to do this in my 20s. The first thing I do if I feel stressed is I run a hot bath and I lie in it and I listen to my favorite music. And I find it fantastic for just soothing myself. So thank you very much. And by the way, I just want to say, anyone who wants to reach out to me, please, I love to be communicated with, and you'll find me on LinkedIn. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much to all three of you, to Sheila, Anthony and Jenny. And if anybody would like to know more about our panelists, please just visit the AoEC website, and there's information there about the programs that they run and who they are in more detail. We have a question about how as a coach to build referral resources, and apart from the GP, who would you have in your bucket of resources?
For me personally, I have a list of therapists actually, Moira, that I mean, it's not about trying to put everybody off to therapy, but when a client comes and they're presenting more often than not with a stress that's not going away, and you can clearly see it's something that's related to past activity. Like Anthony, I have a graph, and at 0 to 10, 0 to -10, and you can see where they sit on that, and they put themselves on it. They then realised, actually, yeah, I could probably do with going and speaking to somebody. So I've got a list of therapists, known therapists that I've worked with in the past, and I give that to my clients. And I also have a list of alternatives. So people who are, Reiki specialists, reflexologists, herbalists, and I'll also give them that as well. So it's different things for different people. But again, it's all about supporting the client. So.
And for people who don't have knowledge of therapists in their area or in someone else's area, there's the British Association of Coaching and Psychotherapy, BACP. That's a great starting place, just to go there and point your client there. So what you're not doing is finding a therapist for your client, but you're helping your client to find the therapeutic support that they might need.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I didn't mean to suggest.
No, I wasn't suggesting you did. But also there are local charities who work around the issues of mental health. So Mind is a national charity and has provision in most areas in the UK.
And internally in organisations, Moira, I would say there's also normally mental health first aiders. So as a rule, anyone who is needing a sort of more deeper support, what you want is just a first step or one step away, because the further they go, the further they, the person will disconnect from it. So actually using the resources within the organisation is a really occupational health, can be the chaplaincy actually, in the NHS and social services, so they will all know how to signpost properly if it's an internal organisational, with that setup. So that's important to rely on the organisation's resources too.
Absolutely.
There's a couple of things that are important about referring as well. First is to make sure that your relationship referral sources understand what you do as a coach. A lot of people skip over that step, and amazingly, a lot of other practitioners don't actually understand coaching that well. So I encourage coaches to give out write a letter, and say, this is what I do before I'm putting you in my referral resources. And the other thing is just this non-diagnostic thing, because we're coaches. In our coaching role, we may have other skill sets, but in our coaching role, we're not diagnosing. It's really important not to implicitly diagnose your client through the referral process, and it sort of imply that you think they have a mental health problem, so that's just two things to be mindful about.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Anthony. So I'm aware of the time and we've come to the end of our 45 minutes. Thank you again to fantastic panelists. And as I said earlier, anybody who would like to know any more, just visit the AoEC website. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody, and we will answer your questions as part of the communication around the recording. So we'll get back to you if there's anything that hasn't, because we're now seeing loads coming in.
Yes.
So we'll all give a bit of a view on that.
That's a huge subject. Yeah.
I think what's coming in is appreciation and thanks.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
We have answered the questions.
Yeah.
Massive subject to try and discuss in 5 minutes each.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Brilliant.